And away we go, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome in. Another outstanding rendition of the Rob Brown Show goes right now. Good morning, upstate South Carolina. Hello, America. What's up, world? Great to be with y'all. Happy Tuesday. Hope that everything is just going exceptionally well for you. I am Rob Brown. My man Brandon filling in one more day as Lonzo continues to get his head right, get his body right. He'll be back with us sooner rather than later, I hope. In the meantime, my guy put in the work. What's up, big dog?
I'm ready. How are you doing today?
I'm living the dream.
You feeling better?
No, but I'm not feeling worse, and that's ultimately the important part, you know?
Yeah, that's right.
Still dealing with whatever. I just don't know what it is. Like I said,
Gotta be allergies.
I can't imagine it's anything else. So I'm actually kind of, in a selfish way, I'm hoping that this gray overcast day is going to turn between now and like 5 p.m. into just a hurricane downpour to knock all the pollen and everything out of the air. Because I at this point, that's got to be it. I can't imagine that this is anything else at this point. So hoping that happens, and then it stops at 5 o'clock, but it's because it's 7 o'clock today. Your Greenville Liberty, the USLW League team right here in the Ville, the sister club of your Greenville Triumph, have a match at home that I will be on play-by-play for, and I very much hope that goes through. So, just like a monsoon for the next, let's call it 6 hours, get the pollen out of the air, then lay it down because your boys got a game to call, and y'all got a game tonight to watch. By the way, if you are interested in watching that game, but you can't make it out to Paladin Stadium this evening on the beautiful campus of Furman University, FU one time, FU two times, FU three times, FU all the time, then you can watch it on 11sports.com. Just Google 11sports.com and then search Greenville Liberty. The game will be broadcast on that website, and your boy will be on the play-by-play call this evening, so make sure you check that out. We have got a lot of things to talk about on the radio broadcast today. And if you would like to be a part of it, now is a wonderful opportunity for you to do just that. I would advise you to do so by giving us a buzz on the GilstratFamilyDealerships.com phone line. That phone number is 844-326-3663. 844-326-3663. You can also shoot us a text on the text line at 71307, 71307. Start your text with FAN, F-A-N, FAN, F-A-N, and we will read those texts live on the air for you today. You can also tweet us at The Rob Brown Show. I know, clever and creative branding at The Rob Brown Show on the Twitter device if you'd like to get at us in that direction. And, of course, you can also tweet everybody at The Fan Upstate. No better words in sports, ladies and gentlemen, than Game 7. Game 7 means whatever you're about to watch is going to be good. And last night was no difference as the Dallas Stars outlast the Seattle Kraken. A wonderful series, a wonderful playoff run for a very young Seattle team, and a team that I suspect we will see back in this situation sooner rather than later. But Dallas last night able to stymie the push by the Kraken late. They were up 2-0. It was a late effort from Seattle to get back to within 2-1, but at that point, there wasn't but inside of half a minute remaining, and it was all over but the curtains for the Seattle Kraken. Listen, It's very simple. The Dallas Stars were the better hockey team. Not by much. It was close. But they ended up with the better goaltending last night when it got desperate and they needed it. And more importantly, they dominated last night with the puck. The majority of that game spent in the Seattle side of the ice. The majority of the offense generated by Dallas last night. Again, a hell of an effort from Grubauer last night to keep that where it was, because a lot of lesser keepers, that would have been a 4-0 game coming into, or at least about halfway through the third. Instead, he kept it respectable and he kept it close.
You gotta admit, it would have been pretty cool to see two expansion teams facing each other the next round.
I don't disagree. I prefer two good hockey teams.
Yeah.
And Dallas was clearly, not by much, but clearly the better team in that series. Again, it was a very, very good series, a very level series for the most of the ride. Both teams got put into some situations that they had a real hard time battling through. A lot of answer and responses from both teams, but when it came down to it, Dallas in Game 7 was just better last night. And they got it done. So now we have our Stanley Cup matchup. We know that over in the East, we are going to see the battle for Rob Brown's heart as the Florida Panthers take on the Carolina Hurricanes. Keep in mind, the Panthers were a wild card team. This is a team they had to scrap and scrape and claw and fight until the very last day of the regular season just to even get in to the playoffs. And what did they do?
They beat the best team in the NHL.
They beat the best regular season team, the Boston Bruins. They gentlemen sweeped them. They were one busted play away from doing the same thing to the best team out of Canada, the Toronto Maple Leafs. They put them down 4-1, and then they move on to take on Carolina. Now, Carolina was the second 1 seed. Carolina slipped in there. They get the win over the Islanders 4-2. They also complete the gentleman's sweep in round 2, knocking off the Jersey Devils 4-1. And now the Florida Panthers taking on the Canes over in the West. Las Vegas gets by Edmonton. Edmonton had knocked off the Kings. It was Vegas over Winnipeg in round 1. Vegas gets the better of the Oilers. The Oilers, the most deadly power play in hockey this year. And it didn't matter because Vegas played an incredibly disciplined defensive game late in that series. They unlocked the Oilers. They win 4-2. The only series that went to 7 in round 2 was Seattle versus Dallas. The Stars move on. So we got a couple of 1 seeds in Carolina and Vegas, a 2 seed in Dallas, and not just a wild card team, but the second wild card team out of the East, the Florida Panthers. And there are your conference finals in the Stanley Cup. I got to tell you, I don't have a lean. I don't have a lean. Dallas, I think, is probably the most top to bottom talented team in these playoffs still remaining. Even as a 2 seed, Dallas is probably the most overall talented team. I think Carolina is probably the best team across the front board. By the way, Teravainen is supposed to be coming back. Remember, they did not have one of their better players in the last series. They still got by in dramatic fashion. But if Teravainen comes deep, that first 5 attack of the Carolina Hurricanes is deadly. The problem they have with the Florida Panthers is that they are without question the most tenacious attacking team left in these Stanley Cup playoffs. Florida does not quit. They don't care about a damn thing. They never let off the accelerator. I think I like Carolina over Florida in this series. Over in the West, I think I'm going to go Dallas over Vegas. I like Vegas. I think Vegas is a fun team. They've got all the storylines there. But I also think that Las Vegas is a team that is kind of slowing up a little bit, right? They let Edmonton kind of get, I mean, granted, it was a 4-2 series win. It wasn't like Edmonton was really a threat. But the longer that series went on, the more it felt like Edmonton was building up some momentum until Vegas got a late goal to separate. I think I like Dallas over Vegas, and I like Carolina over Florida in the conference finals.
I wouldn't mind seeing that, but I feel the West is going to win the whole thing. I just had that feeling. But I think I put some money on Vegas to win. I'd say they win it in 7.
Vegas in 7. I've got Dallas in 6, and I'm going to take Carolina in 7.
I say Carolina in 4.
Oh, no, not a sweep.
Really?
No chance that's a sweep. Listen, I think Carolina's the better hockey team.
Mm-hmm.
But
Florida barely got into this whole playoffs.
I mean, they barely got into the playoffs, and all they've done since then is knock out the best team in hockey and then kick the hell out of Toronto 4-1.
I think they're tired, though.
Here's the thing about playoff sports, right? Like, it's one thing to say Stanley Cup, but we had this conversation yesterday. We were talking very briefly about college baseball, right? We're talking the South Carolina Gamecocks because this is a team that for about 3 months of the college baseball season looked like they were the best team in the sport. And now they've lost what? Back-to-back SEC series and dropped one to who was it?
North Florida.
North Florida.
Jacksonville.
I mean, it's not always about the best team. It's about the team that gets hot at exactly the right moment in time. And I don't think that there's a team. Listen, I like Carolina. They get the 4-1 series win over Jersey. Toronto never felt like a threat in that series,
never
right?
Did.
Jersey, after they won game 3, Jersey felt like a threat.
Mm-hmm.
Jersey felt like they could string two together, and now we got a best-of-3 series. Jersey, even if only a 1-game win, Jersey felt like going into game 4 that this could still end up being a series, even though Carolina jumped out to the 2-0 lead. Toronto got a win, but never felt like a threat.
Maybe I'll change it to 4-1.
I'll be shocked. I mean, I think it could be over in 6. Like, I could see it being a 4-2 series.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see a way Florida only wins 1 game. They're just too damn tenacious, man. Too tenacious. They've had wonderful goaltending, right? And you ask any hockey dude, goaltending is what wins you playoff games.
Yep.
It's nice to put up 5 or 6 goals in a run, but goaltending wins you playoff games. And Florida, of the 4 teams still standing, I think Florida's had the best goaltending in the Stanley Cup playoffs so far. Carolina's been good. Dallas has given up a lot more goals than they wanted to against, again, a wild card team in Seattle. Vegas has been prone to giving up goals. Now, granted, they caught Edmonton, who had the best front line. Now, will they have 2 players on their front line up for an MVP award this year?
Mm-hmm.
But Vegas gave up goals when they definitely didn't need to. I would make the argument that the Florida Panthers have the best goalkeeping in the Final Four, and that's good for 2 wins in any given series. On top of that, their front line has been good too.
Put together, though.
I think Carolina is a team that plays with a hell of a lot of emotion, and when things are going right, they keep going right. But like I mentioned, I go back to that series against Jersey. I go back to the Game 3 win for the Jersey Devils. If you're telling me you weren't a little apprehensive going into Game 4 that Jersey wasn't going to square that series up at a deuce apiece and make it a best-of-3, I'm going to call you a Carolina fan because Jersey stole the momentum away from Carolina. At what point in that series against Toronto did it feel like Toronto had anything for Florida?
It never did.
Even after Toronto won a game, I came back here in the next one and was like, don't worry about it. Florida's getting the next one back.
Yep.
Right? Yes, they lost that game, but they're still the better team with the better momentum. And again, I chalk it up to goalkeeping. I absolutely think Carolina has an incredible, especially frontline attack. And if Teravainen comes back, they're going to be even better. But
the only reason why Toronto advanced against the Lightning was because of all the injuries the Lightning had. I never felt like Toronto was a threat to go far in the playoffs.
I mean, I'm gonna respectfully disagree with that. yes, we can absolutely say that Tampa's injuries were the reason that Toronto won 4-2. Toronto won 4-2 because they're a good hockey team. Are they the best hockey team? No. But Toronto was not a bad hockey team, and Florida crushed them, right?
Yeah.
Like it's one thing to say that they won the series. Again, Toronto wasn't in that series. They won a game, and they weren't in that series. I like Carolina's front line. I really do. Brent Burns has been very, very good. Sebastian Aho is one of the best in the game. Like I said, Tara Vinen should be coming back. That's going to be a big pickup there. I think they've been fine. Here's the other thing I've got to ask about. Antti Raanta, Frederick Anderson, who goes in goal for Carolina, right? We know what the Florida Panther depth chart looks like between the sticks. We know the guy because he's been the guy the whole time. Sergei Bobrovsky has been the guy for Florida this entire series, and he has owned every game as of late. There's no question mark there. Now, granted, Raanta missed time because of an illness, not because he was getting outplayed. But Anderson was respectable in the goal, enough that there was a question when Raanta came back. There is some hit or miss between the pipes for the Canes, and that is why I think Florida, I still think Carolina is the better team. I don't disagree. But the shortest this is going to be is 6 games. And I could see it being 7. I would like to point out, ladies and gentlemen, real quick, because we got to take a break, that the 4 teams remaining in the Stanley Cup playoffs are from Dallas, Texas, Las Vegas, Nevada, Raleigh, North Carolina, and Miami, Florida. When Raleigh, North Carolina is the cold weather climate of the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Just goes to show hockey's getting better in the South.
Don't tell me the South hasn't embraced hockey, because you can put together a great roster, but you've got to have a great hockey community built around a team to have this deep of a run, this much success. And the 4 teams are from Vegas, where it's always 100 degrees. Dallas, Texas, where it's always 100 degrees. Miami, Florida, where the only ice they have goes into a margarita. And Raleigh, North Carolina, because yes, ladies and gentlemen, the Carolinas are soccer country and hockey country now. Welcome to the new age of Carolina sports. Let's take a break. When we come back in just a minute, yesterday, we're going to jump right into this. Yesterday, I gave a prediction. I said yesterday, the ACC is dead. It's not dying. It's already dead. Now it's just a matter of getting it suited for that black suit and figuring out what size coffin it goes in. Well, yesterday after we got off to the show, Sports Illustrated dropped a report that proved that I'm right. And Clemson's involved. I'll tell you what happened yesterday after the show that led me to this when we come back. My name is Rob Brown. Brandon's on the 1s and 2s. You're listening to the Rob Brown Show right here on the Fan Upstate. All right, guys, we got a live read coming up. Y'all stay right there. We're going to talk some college ball. When we come back, don't go anywhere.
Please don't miss out on this.
All right, dudes and dudettes, we're back. Thanks for hanging out. Saw that number 1 recruit in the game ends up going over to Georgia, Rayola. That's a big pickup for Curb. Didn't get a quarterback in the last class, needed one, and they got not only one, but the one. That's big time.
Most corporate credit cards offer points as incentives, but those points amount to less than their worth in real cash value. Ramps business cards offer you cash back, real money in your pocket. Plus, you control who spends what with each vendor. And Ramp software collects and verifies receipts automatically, which means you'll stop wasteful spending and close your books in hours instead of days. Businesses that use Ramp add up to 3.5% to their bottom line the first year. If you're a decision maker, adding Ramp could be one of the best decisions you've ever made. And now get $250 when you join Ramp. Just go to ramp.com/sports. Ramp.com/sports. RAMP.com/sports.
No staring at your phone. No rolling in 2 hours late.
My wife has testing this week.
Say that again.
My wife's school has testing.
Yikes. Have fun with that.
Baseball is in full swing. The free Odyssey app lets you listen to local coverage for the team you love. Live stream your favorite sports radio.
I didn't realize Texas was that good this year until last night when I started watching the game and they're tied. They had the same record as the Braves.
Yeah. Leading the division. Well, they were leading the division. I think they still are.
And then Atlanta turned it on.
Yeah. Rangers still 3 games up on the West. Astros are finally starting to get it together. They had a dive there for a little while. Did the Angels win last night?
Yeah, I think Shohei Ohtani.
Shohei missed the – yeah, they did. Barely. Well, not barely. It was 9-5. All right, a lot of moving parts to this one, so stay with me, ladies and gentlemen. Yesterday on the radio broadcast, I told you, it is no longer a matter of if, it is simply a matter of when. The ACC is dead. The only question mark is, when does it dissolve? Now, I've been convinced of that for a little while. If Clemson and Florida State want out, Clemson and Florida State will get out. And more importantly, because the ACC signed a grant of rights agreement that runs through the mid-2030s. Let me try to put that into a little bit of perspective for you. Most of us, when we get a new job, we do it to make money. That's why we work. Some of us get very fortunate and we love our job, but we don't do it for free. If we did it for free, that would be called a hobby. We do it because we got bills to pay, and we do it because, unfortunately, the electrical company won't keep your lights on if you tell them, I'm really happy. They don't accept that as payment, unfortunately. So, the grant of right agreements runs out in 2036. It was signed, a year and a half ago? There was an exchange that the Atlantic Coast Conference made when they signed that contract. They were looking around at the time that it was signed at the landscape of college football, and we're recognizing that the landscape of college football was at the time and remains now quite volatile. There are teams moving conferences. There are conferences moving teams. There are conferences imploding and conferences exploding. The landscape of college football is remarkably volatile, and one thing that we are all looking for is stability. But there's a scale that you have to consider. It might make sense when you get a new job to sign a long-term contract. Yeah, I'll sign a contract for 7 years to work here. And at the time you go, this is great. I have 7 years of stability, 7 years that I don't have to worry about, am I going to get paid? Where am I going to get paid? Do I have to keep the resume 7 years? I'm good to go. But there is another side of the scale to that. And that other side of the scale, of course, is earning power. If you lock in a contract at a salary for 7 years and you don't give yourself any room with which to negotiate that salary upwards, you might find that 3 or 4 or 5 years into your salary or into your contract, that the salary you're making is no longer competitive for the work that you are contracted to do. And I think that's kind of the spot the ACC finds themselves in. Except, instead of finding themselves in a situation where their earning power is lower than it should have been, or their earnings, instead of finding themselves, man, I'm struggling right now. Instead of finding themselves in a spot where their earnings match up with their earning power, they find themselves in a spot where they're very stable. The ACC is not going anywhere. They got big time money coming in until 2036. The problem is they're watching the earnings of all their coworkers who did not sign long-term contracts. They're watching those salaries skyrocket, and they're watching themselves remain locked into the position that they're in. And here's the other problem they have. Because of the way that the ACC grant of rights agreement is shaped, there's no wiggle room for them. They're not in a spot where they can go to the boss, in this case, ESPN, and ask for a raise because they have no leverage at all. ESPN owns everything for the ACC schools, and there's no reason to give them more money. What are you going to add to the table that justifies us giving you a salary increase? We already own everything. Everything's in our pocket. There's nothing you can give us to justify us giving you more money except the threat of leaving in 2036, 13 years from now. That's not all that much of a threat, to be honest. So, this is why I said yesterday on the show, the only consequence that schools within the ACC can put on the table is to get a majority of the schools together. That takes 8 of them. And vote to dissolve the conference. If 8 schools vote to dissolve the conference, and the conference doesn't exist anymore, then the contract, as I understand it, and I am not an attorney, nor did I stay in a Holiday Inn Express last night, but I did kind of research to the best of my ability. If the conference goes away, if it is dissolved and it doesn't exist anymore, then the current grant of rights contract, which is signed with the conference, would also come off the table. And at that point, each individual school would be free to begin negotiating their own future. Now, that sounds great, except for you've got to have 8 schools. I have mentioned that there are a few schools that likely want out, and I believed them to be Florida State, Clemson, Miami, North Carolina, Duke, maybe. So I said yesterday on the show, I would not be shocked to learn that those schools were going into or at the beginning, the preliminary process of seeing if they could get out of the grant of rights agreement. Well, Ross Dellinger of Sports Illustrated, who wrote the article on, Sunday night, early Monday morning, got it published, that led to the beginning of this conversation, has now reported alongside Brett McMurphy that there are 7 ACC schools who have met in the past several months with lawyers to examine grant of rights contracts and determine how unbreakable they are. Those schools are Clemson, FSU, Miami, North Carolina, 4 of the ones I suspected, and have been joined by NC State, Virginia, and Virginia Tech. So those schools, according to Ross Dellinger and Brett McMurphy, are currently in the process of speaking with lawyers to try and determine how unbreakable the grant of rights agreement is. The thought right now is that schools could buy their way out of it for about $50 million a year. So yesterday when I brought up the ability for a school to leave the ACC for a penalty of $120 million, a lot of people had the initial thought of that really doesn't seem like all that much money, right? Like somewhere, some of these schools, Florida State is going to have 9 or 10 boosters willing to pitch in 10 mil to get them out of the ACC if they believe there's a better destination elsewhere. The problem is still the GOR, because ESPN would still hold the broadcast rights to your school's home games, which means you could join the Big 12 or the SEC or the Big 10. But ESPN still holds your rights, which makes you not valuable to those conferences, which means those conferences aren't going to invite you in, which means you've done nothing. You've actually made your situation dire. So the first step is to figure out how to get rid of the GOR. The first option, I think, that will be explored, and this is what I believe is likely happening with these conversations. The first option that is going to be explored predominantly by the big schools, FSU, Clemson, Miami, North Carolina to some degree, is going to be to make the argument that the ACC negotiated a contract that was not in the best interest of the schools within the ACC. You didn't act in our best interest. You acted on your own volition, and you generated a deal, and then it entered us into a deal that does not help us. Clemson and Florida State both brought in around, I don't have the exact number, but around $80 million in revenue this year, according to certain sources. They are both going to get probably in that ballpark back from the ACC, but so is Duke, so is Pittsburgh, and so is Syracuse. And those schools are going to go, wait a minute, we're putting so much into the pot. These schools that are bringing in $20 million are getting the same money back. That is a deal that you negotiated in bad faith that does not, in fact, it hurts us. And if they could prove that legally, that might be the key to getting out of the grant of rights agreement. I don't think that's going to happen. So the next option you have is to dissolve the ACC itself. Because if the ACC goes away, there's no second party for that grant of rights agreement to be signed alongside, which means those schools would get their broadcasting rights back, as I understand it.
Wouldn't there be a lot of money that they'd be losing, though?
Not necessarily, because the reason you would do that is with the understanding or belief, if you are an FSU or a Clemson, that another conference is going to invite you back in. The SEC, the Big 10, perhaps the Big 12, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Big 12 is making a last gasp of air at this point.
Yep.
If the Big 12, as it stands right now, was able to sign, let's say, Miami, Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, they do a few things. Number one, they bring in a big revenue windfall because all those schools could threaten to bring in $100 million a year apiece.
Mm-hmm.
And B, they plant flags well within the footprint of the Big 10 and the SEC.
They'd have better scheduling.
And on top of that, they create regional rivalries. That is exactly correct. So, the reason you would do this if you are FSU, if you are Clemson, if you are Miami, if you are North Carolina, is with the belief, maybe faith, right? I define faith as, in this case, belief in something for which you have no evidence. That is the definition of faith. Belief in something for which you have no evidence. As far as I know, the SEC nor Big Ten have extended anything formally to any of the individual schools that would lead them to the belief that they have a landing spot already. But they do have to assume we bring enough money to the table. At the end of the day, the final decision is always made by the dollar sign. We put enough money on the table that the Big 12 or the Big 10 the Big 10 or the SEC at the worst, or the Big 12 at the least, would extend an invitation, would enter us into either a more lucrative conference agreement or would be willing to, unlike the ACC, create an unequal distribution model in which the more you put into the pot, the more you get back out of it, which allows us to continue to make more revenue based on our performance. The problem with the dissolution of the ACC model is you got to have 8 schools go along with it. Now, there is a bit of good news here for those schools. That bit of good news is that Notre Dame is a voting member. Notre Dame could be swayed into this. Notre Dame does not have a hand in the pot to the level of a Clemson or a Florida State. They likely would not be a school that it takes a lot to talk into voting into this dissolution, as long as they were promised some sort of deal for scheduling, the reason that they signed this deal with the ACC in the first place, with the schools that are moving out. Hey, Notre Dame, Florida State here, make you a deal. If you sign to dissolve the ACC, we will enter a 1-and-1 10-year deal with you. For the next 10 years, we'll play you 1-and-1 home and away every year. So there's one game as an independent that's taken care of. And you can make the same deal with Clemson, the same deal with North Carolina, whoever else is going to vote. That would sway Notre Dame. So now you've got to have 7 members sign the dissolution proposal. That's interesting. Clemson, FSU, Miami, North Carolina, NC State, Virginia, Virginia Tech. Those are the schools McMurphy and Dellinger have reported are talking about the dissolution of the Grant of Rights Agreement, and that is 7 schools. Plus Notre Dame gives you 8. There's your majority to get the ACC dissolved. Now, the problem that you're going to bump into down the line, I think, is that, yes, FSU will have a landing spot. Which one is it? I don't know. Like I've told you, I don't think it makes the most sense in the world for FSU or Clemson to land in the SEC. I think it makes more sense for them to land in the Big Ten. Well, let's say theoretically the Big Ten, for whatever reason, says, no, we're not interested. Well, now the Big 12 makes sense because, again, if any conference, the ACC, the Big 12, or the Pac-12, if any conference is going to end up in a spot where they're able to thrive, hell, forget thrive, survive with the direction college football is going right now, they're going to have to land a few of the remaining big dogs. The Big 12 is probably the only school that has the only conference that has an opportunity to do that right now.
They need something to keep them going. That's what they need.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They've got to land a couple of Florida State, Clemson caliber schools,
Mm-hmm.
and they've got to do it before the SEC and the Big Ten poach them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the problem isn't with those schools. The problem is, let's say NC State. NC State may not be guaranteed a landing spot. And if they don't know where they're going, they might be fine with dissolving the grant of rights because that effectively allows them to renegotiate a new contract. But dissolving the conference is a whole new step because if NC State doesn't have a place to land, the Big 10, the Big 12, the SEC, they could end up, and forget them, let's also talk about Pitt and Syracuse and Wake Forest. They could all end up landing somewhere like
The AAC.
right. Somewhere like the All-American Conference. Well, I got news for you. That is going to pay dramatically less than the current ACC does.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're looking out for number 1 and you're NC State, And the ACC is going to pay you $85 million a year. And the AAC is going to pay you $52 million a year to be a part of their conference. Well, I don't want to dissolve the ACC. I'm fine with dissolving the grant of rights and establishing a new one. And maybe even trying to do it in a way where we take a little bit less, but we keep Clemson and Florida State putting into the pot. But I'm not getting rid of the conference, because then I'm screwed, which means that every school in this little, as Brett McMurphy called it, the Magnificent Seven, every school is going to have to handshake to look out for each other. If North Carolina gets an invite somewhere, they might have to negotiate to guarantee that NC State comes with them. Florida State and Clemson may have to shake hands on this one and go, wherever you go, I go too. But we've also got to find a way to get a spot for Virginia to land, right? Virginia's not that attractive of a program, even though they open up a new market. They're not going to bring initially a ton to the pot to the SEC or the Big Ten. So you got to find a way to bring them somewhere too, which means that, and this is what I would be interested in, this is where I start going from here's what the facts are to here's what my speculation is. One of the things you could see happening down the line is that the big four out of this seven, Clemson, Florida State, Miami, and North Carolina, may have to end up coming up with an agreement with the smaller schools in question, where they actually end up covering some of the expenses lost for these schools if they leave the ACC but land in an All-American conference or a Mountain West conference or something like that. They might have to come out of pocket and create a little bit of incentive for these schools to go along with them. There's a lot of moving parts here. Let's take a break. When we come back, I got a few more notes on this, but I'm curious as to your thoughts. I'm curious as to what your belief is. Clemson, FSU, Miami, UNC, NC State, Virginia, and Virginia Tech, all exploring with lawyers breaking the grant of rights agreement. I think that is the next step towards the dissolution of the ACC as a whole. How do you feel about it? We're back after this on the Rob Brown Show on the Fan Upstate. All right, guys, give me 30 seconds to run and grab a water. I'll come back and evaluate y'all's thoughts. That's a dumb way to say it. We'll talk. BRB. All right, dudes and dudettes, we're back. It probably will be the same with Virginia and Virginia Tech. The problem is neither Virginia nor Virginia Tech is like is not a brand on caliber with Florida State, Miami, Clemson, probably even North Carolina, to be honest. There's a reason that North Carolina is effectively runs the ACC, if we're being honest.
Innovation Refunds has hundreds of 5-star reviews on Trustpilot and Google, and your business might be entitled to receive up to $26,000 per employee. Businesses of all types can qualify, including medical, professional, construction, even nonprofits. Please don't miss out on this. Even your doctor would tell you to get an expert second opinion, and we do a lot of work for doctors. Download the Innovation Refunds app now or go to getrefunds.com to potentially get a payroll tax refund of $26,000 per employee. Getrefunds.com. Getrefunds.com.
As a roofer, I'm always on the go. So I need to be able to get things done from anywhere. That's why I partner with Beacon. With the new Beacon Pro Plus app, I've got brands I depend on, like GAF, right at my fingertips. It's like having my Beacon rep in my pocket 24/7. I rely on Beacon because I never stop building, and neither do they. Now from June, purchase through Beacon Pro Plus and earn up to $1,500. Beacon, always building.
$25 all-in tickets.
Give me a couple tweet text line.
Yeah, we're going to come to those next. I'm watching a video, Joe Burrow throw a ball like 40 yards just like that, like it's a Nerf ball. Text line's open, 71307. Start your text with FAN, F-A-N, and we'll read them on the air. Hurricane Jeff says, do you think it's possible, and would they dissolve the conference for football only and keep all the other sports under the ACC banner? Here's the problem you're going to have, Jeff. I believe, and again, I'm not an attorney. And if there are any listening who have any thoughts on this, please feel free to jump on board here. I'm not an attorney. But my belief is the ACC can't exist anymore, right? They can't just say, the ACC doesn't exist. It can't exist. They got to dissolve the whole thing. And the reason for dissolving the whole thing is ESPN holds the ACC grant of rights as a whole. So you can't just say, we just don't do football anymore. I mean, they still do football, but just not with us. I don't think it works that way. The conference can't exist anymore. And if it does, then the grant of rights stays in place unless they figure out how to just get rid of the GOR. But the fact is, if this report from Brett McMurphy is correct, these massive schools have been having conversations with lawyers for months. And I promise you, if they had found a weak link in the GOR somewhere that would have allowed them to get rid of it, it'd already be done, dude. The fact that they've been meeting for months and haven't figured anything out means it's probably pretty locked tight. Keep in mind that the other side of this GOR is ESPN. Who is ESPN owned by?
Walt Disney.
The Mouse. The Mouse doesn't lose litigation, man. They have got way more money than the ACC does to make this argument. As we have mentioned a couple of times, listen, I'm not bringing politics into it, but there's a reason that you've heard Ron DeSantis cool his jets as far as his headbutting with Walt Disney. It's because he got into a spot where he realized, oh, damn, the Mouse don't play. If they put together contracts that are ironclad, dude, that's why it is more likely that the ACC ceases existence than that the grant of rights gets broken. Texter says, Twitter feed left a comment that okay, I'll come to that here in just a minute, Ryan. Texter said, do you see the possibility of SEC dropping Mizzou, Mississippi State, and or Vandy? No. The SEC is only going to grow. It's only going to grow. It's only going to get larger. Now, I'll tell you who I think of the schools that we mentioned. I'll tell you who I think is the most likely pickup by the SEC. UNC and NC State. UNC and NC State are the more likely pickups from the SEC. UNC has a very solid base of households. Keep in mind, we talk about markets. But what the term I prefer to use in this case is households, right? Number of television sets tuned in. This is why I've said Tallahassee and Clemson don't make a huge impact because the SEC is already in those households. North Carolina does. And on top of that, you pick up a brand. What is Nike's secondary logo? The Jumpman logo. What's the Jumpman logo come from? North Carolina. You get all the basketball eyes, plus what I truly believe to be a growing North Carolina brand. At some point in the next 3-5 years, North Carolina is going to make a home run hire of a football coach. They are going to be a team that picks up a surprisingly good young assistant coach who's on the rise. North Carolina has done more with less in football the last couple of years, and that will get course corrected. And likely what they're going to do is get NC State to sign this dissolution and go wherever we go, you go too. Tell the SEC, you get us, but you get NC State too. It opens up the entire state of North Carolina. I think that's more likely. But the SEC, I don't think is going to drop anybody. I think they're going to grow. Texas said, Notre Dame is the linchpin in all of this college negotiation and how the landscape would look in the future. If I were those other schools in the ACC, I lost the second half of the text, but effectively it said I'd be negotiating with them. You're correct. The good news for the ACC schools that want to dissolve the ACC is that Notre Dame has a very good reason to go ahead and dissolve the ACC too. They can end up creating a spot where they basically negotiate with individual schools to fill up the schedule, which is the reason they did the deal with the ACC in the first place. So, I'm interested in that because I agree. You need 8 schools to sign off on the dissolution. Notre Dame has a vote. So now really, you need 7. And there are 7 looking at a grant of right agreements dissolution here too. And finally, at Tapouts and TDs on Twitter, said the ACC is going to be the proactive one here. They need to convince Notre Dame football to join as a full-time football member. They need to add some teams like they did a few years ago with Pitt and Syracuse, but they need more marketable teams if they're going to survive. Yes and no, Tapouts and touchdowns. Ryan, appreciate that tweet at the Rob Brown Show. Yes and no. First off, you're not getting... People have got to stop saying this. Notre Dame will not sign as a conference member until they cannot exist as an independent anymore. And NBC is giving them an annual contract that is similar to the payouts of conferences. So until a conference comes to the table and goes, we are going to give you dramatically more money and the same level of autonomy that NBC's contract gives you, Notre Dame isn't signing anywhere. They're fine. The ACC is not going to win Notre Dame over. What the ACC has to do is come up with a way to convince NC State, Virginia Tech, Wake Forest, Pittsburgh, Syracuse, etc., that if the ACC dissolves, you're all screwed. Don't trust Clemson. Don't trust Florida State. Don't trust Miami. This is some Game of Thrones level stuff. They're going to tell you all day, if you dissolve the ACC with us, you're going to be just fine, but you are going to be screwed if you do it. They have got to get the majority of the schools to be terrified of leaving the ACC and getting stuck out in the rain. Let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll continue to address this on the flip side. Keep those texts. Keep those tweets. Keep those stream chats coming on the Rob Brown Show in the Fan Upstate. Man, I left that comment up there the whole stream. Well done, James.
These will put everything in caps.
Travis Benson and his team at CNT Foundations can help. You are right, Gary. CNT can handle any foundation problem, so our customers can breathe easy and focus on what really matters. Let us handle the foundation repair while you handle everyday life. Set up a free consultation by visiting yourfoundationexperts.com. Call 864-581-3341. CNT Foundations, your foundation experts.
Want to quickly become dad's favorite? Get him what he really wants for Father's Day. The Upstate Golf Cart. 18 holes at 9 of the best courses in the Upstate. The Preserve at Verde, the Club at Brookstone, Carolina Springs, The Rock, Rear Golf, Bowling Green, just to name a few. And best of all, now through Father's Day, the Upstate Golf Cart is on sale. 1 for $75 and 2 for 1.
FSU is the little finger of the ACC. That is so dead spot on, dude. That is 100% correct. FSU's AD, and we're going to talk about him in just a minute. But FSU's AD is 100% the little finger of the situation. Well done. That's a great analogy and spot on. Same. Game of Thrones season 1 through 5 was the best television show to ever be made, which is why its terrible ending was so damn disappointing. Did you watch Game of Thrones? 5 seasons of the best television I've ever watched. And then they just crapped all over it. All over it. It was infuriating. So the difference is, I don't think anybody's going to make the argument that Lost was the greatest television show of all time. Game of Thrones was. Not a debate. Its statement of facts was. And then they just didn't want to do it anymore. Shout out to my guy, James, because James nailed it. For those of you that did not watch Game of Thrones, I don't know if I want to issue an I'm sorry or a congratulations. Game of Thrones, I have a point, stick with me. Game of Thrones was for a period of time in American pop culture the greatest television show that has ever been made. Hands down, in my opinion. There was Game of Thrones had nothing missing. It had everything. It had action. It had adventure. It had mystique. It had intrigue. It was a spy drama with sweeping giant battles. It had dragons. It had everything. It was, for a period of time, the greatest television show that's ever been made. And part of the reason it was the greatest television show that had ever been made was the characters. Great television shows are created by great characters within great stories. If you have meh characters inside of a great story, you have a good TV show. If you have great characters inside of a meh story, you have a good TV show. If you have bad characters, doesn't matter how good the story is, you have a bad TV show. If you have bad story, doesn't matter how good the characters are, you have a bad TV show. In order for a TV show to be great, you have to have great characters and a great storyline. Game of Thrones had both. And one of my favorite characters was the character of Littlefinger. Now, if you watch Game of Thrones, you know who I'm talking about. Littlefinger, Peter Baelish, was the effectively master of spies within the kingdom in question here. Initially, when reporting to the king / the council, he basically collected rumors from his little birdies all over the kingdom. So nobody knew what was going on anywhere at any given point in time better than Lord Peter Baelish did. But eventually, Baelish recognized that the flow of information could go both ways. And Baelish began to use the same tactics that got him the information to disseminate information back outwards, and was able to manipulate and therefore play the Game of Thrones. See, that's why they call it that. Except for Littlefinger got a little big for his britches down the line. He started scheming against Sansa, against Arya, against Jon Snow, etc., etc., etc. And eventually it led to Peter Baelish getting the old knife across the throat treatment from Arya and Sansa when they figured out the schemes that he was going through. But for a while, all the happenings within the Game of Thrones that was being played by the nobility of Westeros was organized and orchestrated by Peter Baelish, a.k.a. Littlefinger. Well, I can now say somewhat comfortably that atop the Atlantic Coast Conference, there is a Game of Thrones being played. And we know the highlight players. We know the kings and queens. They are Florida State. They are Clemson. They are Miami. We also know who the next in line for nobility is. North Carolina is in that group. I would say that NC State is more like the little sister of the next in line, right? It's the Arya to UNC Sansa, if you want to go down that line. I'm not saying these analogies are perfect. I am saying they're pretty damn good, all right? They stand a lot to be gained by the progression of Sansa towards the throne, so to speak. But all of this revolves around one Littlefinger, right? In every great Game of Thrones, there's one little finger that has to be discussed. In this metaphor, that little finger is Florida State Athletics Director Michael Alford. Michael Alford has, without question, been the most vocal voice of authority in this entire discussion. Michael Alford has been the one that has been pointing out that the unequal model of distribution, which the ACC does not use, would give Florida State and Clemson the opportunity to make more money to bring into the ACC. See what he's doing there? He's trying to create a message where everybody feels that they are going to benefit more. And I'm not saying he's right or wrong. I think he's right. But I'm not saying he's right or wrong for the sake of this conversation. What he's trying to do is create a message that if Florida State, one of the nobility in this conversation was to have more, then the peasants in the fields would also by default get more, right? Because if the king has more, he can do more with it, which benefits everybody out there across Westeros, or in this case, the ACC. He's trying to play a game of manipulation, and I think it's worked. Now, he made another very interesting point. He did an interview with War Chant, which is, I believe, a Rivals site down in Tallahassee that covers the Knolls. And he discussed some hot topics that he believes are going to be central focuses of conversation at the ACC spring meetings, which are happening right now just north of Jacksonville, Florida, the butthole of America. Why would you mention that, Rob? Because I'm never going to pass on an opportunity to make sure Jacksonville knows its place in the anatomy of the United States of America. So, one of the things that he pointed out is that Florida State is watching, as is the rest of the ACC, the expansion of the rest of the college football landscape. And one of the things that has happened is that the University of Central Florida is joining the Big 12. The Big 12 recently renegotiated their television contract. They renegotiated theirs through the 2030-2031 season. It is up for negotiation 5 years before the ACC's next contract negotiation is up. Assuming that the trend of television negotiations continue on the path that they're on, Michael Alford makes the point, and I believe it to be true, that within the next 7 years, the University of Central Florida not only could, but will be making more money from their conference than Florida State and Miami.
Wow.
He said, quote, "If you look at the revenue projections, they should have a better agreement than we have by going out to market. That means there's going to be another school in the state that's going to have a better agreement than Miami and us, and that's just not acceptable to us." Now, one of the arguments against the concept of nobility is that people aren't inherently better than other people based on a birthright, right? This is why I asked my guy, the Stone Man, the other day, who is British, if he is an anti-monarchist, right? We all spent scratch that. Some of y'all last week spent time watching a man be crowned king in tens of millions of dollars in valuable jewelry. You all watched a man have a ceremony thrown about him that he got because his mama and his daddy came from a mama and a daddy who came from a mama and a daddy who came from a mama and a daddy who had a bunch of people convinced that God said, like we're kind of the best. We're kind of the best people. So we deserve to live our lives in extravagance paid for by you, the taxpayer. Because God said so. Otherwise, why would my mama and my daddy have had me? I think the issue here, the end of the comparison between what's happening in the ACC versus what happened in Game of Thrones. Yes, I am going deep down this rabbit hole. Hang out. Is that Florida State and Miami, for the sake of this conversation, Clemson, all put together over the years, a very extensive reason why they're the best in their respective markets. Florida State is empirically more valuable, with all due respect to UCF, more important to college football than UCF is. They just are. So for them to say, it's kind of, what's the word I'm looking for here? Asinine that UCF is making more money than us is correct. It would be the same as if in 4 or 5 years, Wake Forest Demon Deacons join the Big 12.
Well, the entire Mountain West Conference is possibly going to join the Big 12.
They might. And this is one of the reasons that the ACC is acting so damn quickly. It is because this is a ticking time bomb. And the longer these schools remain where they are today, the less places there are for them to go. If they get out now, while the Big 12 is absolutely looking to not only survive, but try to put themselves into the conversation with the Big 10 and the Southeastern Conference. And if the Big 12 is willing to adopt the policies the ACC has not been, which makes joining that conference more lucrative for FSU, Clemson, North Carolina, etc., they can make the jump now before the Big 12 swells and goes, whoa, we gotta hold up for a minute. We gotta get everything locked down before we add more down the line. Because it is no guarantee that the SEC and the Big 10 will take FSU, Clemson, Miami.
Nope.
And those three, they're the keys.
Mm-hmm.
So if the Big 10, the SEC won't take those schools, there's really only one other landing spot for them, and that's the Big 12, or to join up with a All-American conference.
And really, could you see Clemson going to the All-American though?
So it would take all of those schools from the ACC agreeing to do it together and basically make a last-ditch effort to generate a new power conference. The answer right now is obviously no. Why would they ever go there?
Mm-hmm.
But the question's not, would Clemson go to the AAC?
Would FSU do it?
It's not would FSU do it. It's not would Carolina do it. It's not would Miami do it. It's would all of them do it together? Would all of them be willing to go? Would they be willing to take NC State, Virginia Tech with them? Because remember, you've got to give 7 schools a reason to leave. So would they be willing to call the AAC and go, yo, look, we know that you are, respectfully, not a power. But if you're willing to take all of us, we all join you, and you're willing to effectively let us, the big dogs, control the conference, we'd be willing to join up. That is a, admittedly, remote but a possibility. It's absolutely a possibility. So I would not be shocked down the line to find out that Florida State, Miami, Clemson, North Carolina made a phone call, said, look, are you willing to effectively let us become the AAC and keep the teams that are already in the fold, bring all the revenue we bring to the table, but we're in control of how the conference works logistically. Like, we get to make the shots. I think if you're the AAC, you go, yeah, because you're worth like a lot of money that we don't know. Quick, anybody playing the Rob Brown Show home edition. Brandon, name me 3 members of the American Athletic Conference right now.
Ooh, I think one of them is Connecticut, right?
Sure.
That
That is, yep.
I think it's Connecticut, Louisiana Tech. Ooh, that's the only 2 I know. I don't know
You
very many
have-
schools.
You have right now members that are as of right now. You got to keep in mind, UConn, Cincinnati, and Houston
Mm-hmm.
have all moved to the Big 12. We're all moving to the Big 12 at the end of this year.
Mm-hmm.
Your members right now are nope, because UCF's gone too, right? Yeah,
Mhm.
UCF's gone too. Memphis, SMU, South Florida, Temple, ECU, Tulane, Tulsa, Navy as a Notre Dame style membership,
Yeah.
Wichita State, and I think you have a few more joining in the next couple of years.
I know Montana State is moving up. I think they're joining the All-American.
Here's the thing. None of those are needle movers.
No.
None of them matter.
That's
Okay?
not going to generate the amount of income. All those together, they're not going to generate the same amount that you would get just alone from FSU and Clemson.
Correct. So again, I don't think this is what's going to happen. I'm saying it's absolutely a possibility that it could happen. But Michael Alford is effectively saying, look, UCF's going to make more money than us.
Mm-hmm.
That can't happen. That it just can't happen. And
Because
he's not
UCF's a
wrong.
very small school, too.
It doesn't matter. They can't do it. It can't happen. UCF, no matter how big they get, over the next 7 years, cannot make more money than FSU. If for no other reason, that's a failure of the ACC.
Mm-hmm.
Your crown jewels are Florida State and Clemson. If UCF is making more money than Florida State and Clemson, the ACC is by definition a failure.
Turning
at
into a
that
toilet bowl there.
So you have to fix it. Now, the only question that I have left at this point is, what does the ACC do? Because they've got to know that the longer the status quo stays in place, A, the more lethal it is to them as a conference. B, the further behind they fall to the Big Ten and the SEC, and the harder it becomes to catch up. And C, the more likely it is that FSU and Clemson, Miami, UNC, etc., as soon as that 2036 GOR comes up, if they don't have a way out and the ACC stays status quo between here and there, when it is up, they fly the old double birds to the ACC, and they are gone. And at 2036, so's the ACC. So you don't sit there with your thumb up your backside for 13 years going, yeah, we're good. You got to figure something out now, because you've got aggrieved parties who are now actively and loudly speaking out effectively against your whole ass existence at this point. Let's take a break. Got a few more thoughts coming in on the text line and on the Twitter feed. 71307 is the text line. Shoot me your text. Start your text with FAN, F-A-N. We'll read them on the air. You can also tweet us at The Rob Brown Show. Give me your thoughts. What you got? We'll keep talking about them when we come back on The Rob Brown Show on the Fan Upstate.
San Diego State's going to the Pac-12?
Might as well. That's a good little brand. Be right back, guys. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. The disrespect to the Cougs.
This is an important notice to consumers facing $10,000 or more in credit card debt, medical bills, or other unsecured debt. You may not be required to pay it all back.
Didn't Houston move to the Big 12?
Programs now in effect.
I don't even remember anymore, to be honest with you. There's so many damn teams moving around.
Mm-hmm.
These programs, which the credit card companies like to keep secret, exist to aid American consumers struggling with overwhelming credit card debt by offering tremendous savings and real debt relief. Accredited Debt Relief has established a special hotline for you to call and learn what savings you qualify for. They've helped qualify consumers with over $1 billion in debt and are A+ rated with the Better Business Bureau. So don't wait. Get the relief you need during these hard economic times. For this free information, call the Accredited Debt Relief Hotline now. Call 800-330-2900. 800-330-2900. That's 800-330-2900.
There's nothing worse than coming home from a hot day to find out that your AC unit isn't working. When this happens, you need an HVAC company you can trust. A company like Priority Heating and Air. Their HVAC specialist will give your system a thorough checkup. And if you need a new unit, Priority Heating and Air is a proud distributor of the Coleman line of HVAC systems. So keep your family or business cool this summer and give Priority Heating and Air a call today at 591-1847 or find them online at PriorityHeatingandAirHVAC.com.
Sponsored by Corley Plumbing, Air and Electric.
At Corley Plumbing, Air, and Electric, we provide transparent, upfront pricing you can depend on. Call Corley Plumbing, Air, and Electric today, or skip the line and book online. CorleyPro.com. That's CorleyPro.com.
More than the scores. Real sports talk. Real sports fans.
The Rob Brown Show, now 9 to noon, upstate.
The Rob Brown Show continues. It is the Fan Upstate. We have spent quite a bit of time on this discussion so far. As we mentioned earlier in the show, Brett McMurphy and Ross Dellinger have made a report. Started this week with the discussion that the ACC meetings were going to feature discussions between schools about getting out of the grant of rights agreement. Then Dellinger and McMurphy dropped the bomb on us yesterday that Florida State, Clemson, Miami, the three I projected, North Carolina, one I assumed, were being joined by Virginia, Virginia Tech, and NC State as 7 schools considering breaking the grant of rights agreement, or at least having the conversations to figure out how to do just that. The next step in that, logically to me, is that they would then begin working on a way to dissolve the conference as a whole. But again, NC State, Virginia, and Virginia Tech may be keen on the idea of getting out of the grant of rights, because remember, if they get out of the grant of rights and they can negotiate for more money as they go, which is going to be hard to do because ESPN already has all the chips on their side of the table for the most part. Well, they might be keen on that because that rising tide would float all boats. They may not be quite as keen on dissolving the conference because while Clemson, Florida State, Miami, and probably North Carolina would all be all but guaranteed a landing spot in one of the other conferences, the SEC, the Big 10, or the Big 12, NC State is certainly not. Virginia is certainly not. Virginia Tech is certainly not. You'd like to think there's room for them somewhere, but it may not be in what would become the Big 3 if the ACC goes away, the Big 10, the SEC, or the Big 12. And so because of that, step one is to see if there's a way to get out of the GOR, and if not, step 2 becomes then for the top 4, Carolina, Miami, Clemson, and Florida State, to convince 3 others plus Notre Dame to vote to dissolve the conference, which does require a majority. That, of course, now is 8. 7 is exactly 50%. That's not the majority. So they would need 8. That may not be the easiest vote to get 8 affirmatives for, unless there's some negotiation at the table, right? North Carolina, Florida State, and Clemson would have to look at, and Miami, would each have to probably pick a dance partner and say, wherever we go, we'll get you an invite too. And if we can't get you an invite, we won't join. Leaves a lot of room for backstabbing, right? Like I said, there's some interesting Game of Thrones projections going on here. There's going to be some spots where trust is required, but perhaps not freely given, which I think it makes it all that much more interesting. I've been getting some thoughts from different fans. Here's a couple of tweets and texts and stuff that I've gotten in so far. One of the things is this. It is going to take FSU, Clemson, Miami, and 5 others. As I mentioned, I think Notre Dame is probably easily swayed with some sort of agreement between each school. Hey, Notre Dame, if you vote alongside us to dissolve the Atlantic Coast Conference, as they do have a voting buy-in by becoming a football member only, an everything member and not football, but having the scheduling agreement, we'll go ahead and keep our scheduling agreement with you, right? You could still keep Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina on the rotating schedule every year. So now you need 4 more. That means that there are 9 schools with Notre Dame remaining. You have to sway 5 of them to come with you. They could all basically say, no, we're good. We're good. If they all tank it and the ACC sees nothing change, they can't get out of the GOR and they can't find 8 schools to go along for the ride, and nothing changes. The ACC between now and 2036 has basically one recourse left, and that is to go to ESPN and go, look, we know you've got the rights, and we know you've got the rights till 2036, and we know you have all the leverage at the table. And frankly, no reason to give us more money. And we get that. But let us tell you what's going to happen here. What's going to happen here is you're not going to give us any more money. We are going to stagnate a little bit. And we are going to get so passed up by the Big Ten, by the SEC, and probably by the Big 12 at some point as they continue to expand, that when the agreements come back up in 2036 for the renegotiation, we're going to be a money-losing endeavor for you. You're going to hamper us to the point that you're going to have a product that you're paying for 13 more years that within 5 or 6 won't be a highlight product anymore. Right now it is. Right now it is. If only because of Clemson, Florida State, Miami. I think North Carolina could join that group. NC State's been close for a couple of years, but just never able to take that last step. But you're going to get us lapped by everybody else. And it's going to hurt your image as much as ours. So, come to the table for a mild renegotiation. We'll keep the deadline in place, but let's put some revenue targets where if we accomplish this, you add some money to the pot. If we accomplish this, you add some more money to the pot. That might be the only thing that these ACC schools have left. I will also point out to the texter who earlier in the show, and I lost the text, it's somewhere in the thread, and I apologize for that. But you know who you are, and you didn't sign it, so whatever, you don't care that much. To the texter earlier who said, Rob, it's only Tuesday, and it feels like we have gotten a lot of information and what effectively amounts to a 24-hour span. Why? The answer is the ACC meetings are happening right now in just north of Jacksonville. These two big nuggets of information we've gotten, plus all the quotes from guys like Michael Alford. And again, don't be shocked if you get a couple of quotes from Graham Neff, the AD at Clemson, the next couple of days in the same direction. The reason all of this is dropping now is because of the fact that the ACC meetings are happening now. All the power players are in one room. And remember, this is not the media kickoff. That's in North Carolina in a couple of months. We'll likely be there covering that live. And I suspect we're going to have a lot of reasons to be asking some questions to Dabo and Mike Norvell. These meetings are primarily closed off to the media, right? These meetings are happening largely behind closed doors. So all these schools have all their power players in one hotel, all sitting together for 8, 9, 10 hours all day for a week. This is the time to talk about them. This is the time for ideas to come to the table. This is the time for concepts to come to the table, for people to put their problems up, for people to pop their grievances out in the air and go, if X, then Y, if Y, then Z, and Z is good and Z is bad, and here's why, and here's how we think you should vote and why, and here's maybe some consequences we've considered that you haven't. This is the time they can all put it out on the table. This is the time they can all discuss it. And on top of that, have it be kicked around in circles like this one, right? Because money is the driving factor. But popular opinion is the second most important thing at the table. They want all of us discussing this and frankly backing it so that they can all look at each other and go, yeah, we've got the crowd support and we believe the money's coming down the line. Let's make this happen. Let's make this happen. So, this is interesting because I can promise you that Michael Alford and Graham Neff and Dan Radakovich down at Miami, the former Clemson AD, now the Miami AD, they're all going to be sitting down with the ADs at NC State, Syracuse, Wake Forest, Pittsburgh, NC State, Duke, and doing some lobbying here. It is political season at this point. So the reason we got this absolute rush of news the last 48 hours is not unscripted. It's not an accident. This was all planned from the beginning, man. This was all planned from the beginning. So we'll see what comes next. Like I said, I suspect there's a lot of politicking taking place right now just north of Jacksonville, Florida, the butthole of America. Not a great tourism line. Absolutely the truth. So where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? The answer is, frankly, I don't friggin' know. I don't know, and I don't think anybody else does either, right? Like I said yesterday on the show, I am unaware of Clemson, FSU, North Carolina, or Miami, any of them making any outward queries to other / bigger conferences about invitations. I'm not saying it hasn't happened. I'm saying I'm unaware if it has. Could that change? I don't know. My suspicion is there's probably some terminology somewhere in one of these contracts we're discussing that says y'all can't do that. Y'all can't have those conversations, right? So the only conversations are internal. And again, right now, those are closed off to the public. And on top of that, and this is just my suspicion, my speculation, the ADs and the presidents at the schools involved, they probably do want it known to some degree that these conversations are happening. They want ESPN, or they hope ESPN, at some point is going to look into this and go, you know what, dude? Like, we don't really want to deal with this. So what if we just go ahead and give you a new GOR or update the terms of the GOR or add some addendums to the GOR that get you a little bit more in line with the money you want to make, right? Let's just nip this thing in the bud. Instead of breaking up the ACC, which we worked so hard to gain rights for 15 damn years to, instead of breaking that up or even risking the breakup, let's just renegotiate this whole thing and give you guys what you want to get away from it. What the schools don't want to happen, I don't think, is for it to become knowledge that they do or do not have the votes required to do anything, right? I think they like to keep that a secret. I think they'd like to keep that the nuclear option. Keep the nuclear option on the table. Because if you know you have the nuclear option, you can do one of two things. You can come to the table and you can go, hey, maybe I got the votes, maybe I don't. But like, what do you say we have a little discussion here? Huh? And if they don't, you just go, cool, blow it up. We're done. Bye. You can negotiate with us in good faith and give us the money that we deserve, which, let's be real, if you're Florida State, if you're Clemson, is more than the University of Central Florida. Or we can just all walk and be just fine. Sorry, Pitt. Sorry, Cuse. Sorry, Wake. Sucks to be you guys, but we got to look out for number one because y'all aren't joining the party. Y'all are never going to be a top-tier power dynamic school, or at least not anytime between here and 2036. So negotiate in good faith or find out what happens. We'll see. All right. I think we can get away from that discussion for a little while. I think we've pretty much covered that coast to coast. Let's take a break. When we come back here in just a minute, we got a bunch of stuff we got to get to. Game number 1 in the Western Conference Finals is tonight. The LA Lakers taking on the Denver Nuggets. Braun versus the Joker. Who do we like in game 1? Who do we like in the series? We'll take a look at that. Stanley Cup Conference Finals are set. Get a couple of days off before we get those underway. We got Florida and Carolina on one side. We got Dallas rolling on into the West on the other side. We're going to break down those conference finals. Plus, I hate what the Oakland Athletics have done to A's fans, but they did get something right in the move. I'll tell you what that is coming back. All that and more on the Rob Brown Show on the Fan Upstate. All right, let's go to grab a water. Be right back.
run a business, even if you've asked your CPA about this, you owe it to
I
yourself.
saw that, Trey. From what I understand, he will be playing some role in Captain America New World Order. That'll be interesting.
Download the Innovation Refunds app now. Refunds up $26,000 per employee. Innovation.com. The hard way.
I kept going. Then I got so lightheaded, I couldn't. My doctor said I have AFib, so I'm about 5 times more likely to have a stroke. Other symptoms, irregular heartbeat, heart racing, chest pain can come and go, but the risk of stroke stays. If you have symptoms, tell a doctor. Visit NoTimeToWait.com.
Sponsored by Bristol Myers Squibb and Pfizer. Without the ones like you, who work tirelessly to keep things running, everything would suddenly stop. They all depend on you. No matter the weather, emergency, or time of day, you're the ones who get it done. At Grainger, we're here for you with professional-grade industrial supplies. Count on real-time product availability and fast delivery. Call clickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Always streaming wherever you are on the Odyssey app. Make that phone upstate a favorite.
Wrapping up hour number 2 of the Rob Brown Show. Rob Brown, my man Brandon, filling in for the great one, Lonzo. Still resting up, getting his body right. We appreciate Brandon's hard work these last few days. You guys send your good thoughts and vibes over to the great one at Lonzo on Word on Twitter, at Lonzo on Word. All right, a couple of different stories we need to get into here. I think we've kind of run the college expansion discussion into the ground. If you guys do have any follow-up thoughts on it, feel free to shoot them on over at the Rob Brown Show on Twitter. And if you're not a Twitterer, you can email them to me, rob.brown@thefanupstate.com, rob.brown@thefanupstate.com. Real quick, we brought this up very briefly yesterday. Kind of interesting that Matt Ryan announced he would be joining the CBS broadcast booth as an analyst, but also wanted to make it abundantly clear that he's not retired. He's just going into broadcasting. Moment now, we know why. The Indianapolis Colts traded for Matt Ryan last year. They knew that they would owe him $12 million this year, whether he played or not. But they cut him in March to avoid having another $17 million shift over from an injury guarantee to a full guarantee. That is to say that if Matt Ryan was to have played for the Colts this year, even if he wasn't a starter, they'd owed him 17. They owe him 12 based on the cut. However, the Colts would not owe him that $12 million if he was to actively avoid an opportunity to actively be involved. Nobody wants Matt Ryan, all right? We at this point know that. I think Matt Ryan could still be a decent quarterback. If there was a bad team who just needed somebody to take snaps for a year, Matt Ryan would be a above average plug-in, but I think Matt Ryan would do enough to make you not competitive for the playoffs, but also not competitive for a top-tier draft pick. So nobody's walking through the door that Matt Ryan has left open. And I'm air quoting that so hard my fingers get pulled. But if Matt Ryan was to say, I'm retired, I don't want to play football anymore, then the Colts would basically be, if they wish to pursue it, off the hook for $12 million.
Gotta get that money.
So Matt Ryan has to say that he's not retired to leave the option open for another football team to pick him up. But he, along with most of us, are relatively sure nobody's going to do that. meaning he is an actively available player that nobody wants to take advantage of, meaning the Colts still have to pay him $12 million for cutting him back in March. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why Matt Ryan has been happy to announce that he is now a CBS studio analyst and potential color commentator, but is definitely not retired. He's got 12 million reasons to say that. So now, ladies and gentlemen, that mystery has been solved. Let's take our final top of the hour break. When we come back in the next hour, I've got a couple of baseball stories for you. The Bravos played an unscripted home run derby last night as they beat the hell out of the division-leading Texas Rangers 12-0, and the Bats were alive for the Bravos. We'll break that down. Plus, it makes me sick what the Oakland Athletics have done to the city of Oakland and the Oakland A's fans, but the next step they've taken was absolutely the right one. I'm going to tell you what that is coming up on the show. And the NFL makes a decision that has boggled the minds of many a sports fan. I'm going to tell you why it's really not that confusing. That's all coming up in the next hour of the Rob Brown Show on the Fan Upstate. Brandon, who is your college team? Well, you can't see the top of the visor, ladies and gentlemen, but it does have a tiger paw print on it.
My team in general, though, University of Hawaii.
The Warriors.
Yep. Colt Brennan was my favorite quarterback. I hate that he's gone.
Aid taxpayers. This initiative was established for anyone facing financial hardship and unable to pay their back taxes. Qualifying and enrolling in this program will stop all collections, settle your delinquent tax problem, and even reduce what you owe by thousands of dollars. Call the hotline at People's Tax Relief to see if you qualify and get this free information by dialing 800-924-7415. If you have unfiled tax returns or cannot afford to pay your personal or business back taxes, you can now get the help you need. One simple phone call can resolve your tax problem and save you thousands of dollars. To see if you qualify and to get this important free information, call 800-924-7415.
Really, Brandon?
800-924-7415. 800-924-7415.
If you're hired, it can feel like you're trying to find a needle in a haystack. You can hope the right person comes along, or you can just use ZipRecruiter. And now you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/radio. In fact, ZipRecruiter has helped a lot of business owners find their needle in a haystack, like Marco.
Of operations at Teletakas and Auto Centers. A lot in the last few years.
To a head mechanic.
ZipRecruiter helps me find all the right people, even the most difficult jobs. ZipRecruiter helps me keep my business running.
Take it from Marco and millions of other businesses who use ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter can help you find the needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free at ZipRecruiter.com/radio. That's ZipRecruiter.com/RADIO. ZipRecruiter.com/radio. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
This is Free for This Little Lake, the podcast about falling in love with music. I started a non-profit music school about 20 years ago called the Silver Lake Conservatory of Music. The reason that I started doing this podcast was music education. I'll be speaking with Rick Rubin, Thundercat, Stuart Copeland, Margaret, Corey Henry, Cynthia Arriva, Sheila E. and Patty.
That's pretty cool, Trey. I wouldn't mind being on the Rob show or even on sides.
Are you kidding me? Gas prices are up.
I don't know, man. Like, do you guys? This is a genuine question for those of y'all watching on the stream right now. Do you guys prefer having a show where the host has an affiliation or not? And I'll tell you the truth. Like, it's not going to change me. So again, my affiliation is to any school that wins and makes me more money. That's my favorite school. My favorite school is whichever one is boosting the paycheck the most for me. I don't really have a local affiliation. I'm not from here. So it's not like I'm just going to wake up tomorrow and be like, oh, I'm a South Carolina fan. I'm a Clemson fan. Like, I'm a big Furman guy because we are the home for Furman athletics here in the upstate. So, of course, I am. And because everybody at Furman has been stellar for me so far, and to me, I should say. And here we go, ladies and gentlemen. The third and the final, the best, the money hour of the Rob Brown Show starts right now. This is the Fan Upstate. Welcome back, y'all. Good to have you. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate you being a part of the show. If you'd like to join us, you can do so. The Gilstrap Family Dealerships.com phone line is right there for you at 844-326-3663, 844-326-3663. You can also shoot us a text at 71307. 71307. Start your text with FAN, F-A-N, FAN, and we'll read them on the air. You can also shoot us a tweet at The Rob Brown Show, at The Rob Brown Show, at Lonzo on Word if you want to send him some well wishes. And, of course, hit everybody at the station at The Fan Upstate, all the different ways to get in touch with the radio broadcast. You can also shoot me an email if that's easier for you at rob.brown@thefanupstate.com, rob.brown@thefanupstate.com. So there's all the different ways for you to get in touch with the radio program. A couple of texts that have come in so far, ladies and gentlemen. Texter said, Rob, is Columbia the butthole of South Carolina? I'm going to say no, all right? And nothing to do with the school. I've been to Columbia 4 or 5 times since I moved here. I have been over there for 2 football games. I have been over there for an all-elite wrestling show. I went over there for the Star Awards, the South Carolina Broadcasters Association Star Awards the year before last, when Lonzo and I picked up our hardware for 2021 Sports Talk Radio Show of the Year. Takes a bow. And I was over there with the lady friend for a Cowboy Mouth concert.
What's that?
It's a band.
Oh,
out of New Orleans. One of my favorite live bands to ever see. If you get a chance to see Cowboy Mouth, do it. Tell them Rob Brown sent you. Love those guys. Anyway, I've been over there a handful of times, and I never found myself in a point where I was like, okay, I've done it all. I've seen it all. Like, I've had enough. It's over. Like, it's underwhelming. I enjoyed it. I like Clemson, too. Now, Clemson is one of those, and this is not a bad thing, because there's a lot of places like this that are great. Athens, Georgia is another one. Clemson is one of those towns where it's like there's the campus, and then that's it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I went down there a couple of years ago, and I guess it was last year. Went over there last year when the Greenville Triumph concluded their preseason exhibitions with a match at the then reigning, defending, undisputed NCAA men's soccer national champion, Clemson Tigers. So we went down there very early, spent a couple of hours exploring the campus, went to the match, spent a couple of hours exploring the campus further after the match. Very much enjoyed my time there as well. I don't know where the armpit of South Carolina is.
I can tell you where the armpit of America is.
Jacksonville, Florida.
Arlington.
I've not been to Arlington, to be honest with you.
They call that the armpit of America is Arlington, Texas.
Is that because of the temperature?
Yes.
Okay. I've not been to Arlington. I've not been to Austin. They are both Arlington's not really on my list.
No.
Jerry World's on my list.
Yeah.
Right? I just want to see it. I can't stand a Dallas Cowboy. Whoever they're playing the day that I go to Jerry World, I will be a fan of that team. Don't particularly care who it is unless it's Atlanta, in which case I'll be rooting for
the turf.
Yeah. I have made my way to a good chunk of the state of South Carolina.
Been to Charleston yet?
I actually
oh my God,
love
it's
Charleston.
So beautiful down there.
I love Charleston. I love Mount Pleasant, just across the river.
Yep.
So I've been to the what do they call it? The high country, the up country. The low country.
Low country.
I've been to the low country.
Been to the Midlands.
I have been across the Midlands. I've been to Columbia, obviously, a number of times. I've seen some of the smaller little towns and communities around it. I don't know what I would describe as the worst place in South Carolina. I can promise you the worst place in South Carolina pales in comparison to Jacksonville.
The where?
Jacksonville, Florida, the butthole of America. But I honestly don't know where I would call that in the state of South Carolina. You know, I feel like let's do this just for fun. Exempting Columbia and Clemson from the list.
Mm-hmm.
We always ask what the best is. Where's the best pizza, the best burger? Where's the best music venue? Where's the best this? Where's the best that? Let's do the opposite. What's the worst place in South Carolina?
Oh.
What's the worst place in South Carolina? For whatever reason you may deem it so.
Want to hear my opinion?
Fire away.
Spartanburg. You know why they call it? You know what Nick Spartanburg's nickname is, right?
Sparkle City?
Murderburg. Because it used to be the murder capital of the U.S.
Yeah, but it's not anymore.
It's still pretty high.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been to Spartanburg a handful of times. We obviously broadcast in the Berg on 97.1 FM over there. And I've been over there for some events. I'm over there multiple times a year for different stuff we're doing, and once or twice a year just because I want to get to the Berg. I like downtown the Berg.
I think part of Spartanburg is very beautiful, but we have family that lived up there, and they regretted living up there. I had a friend who lived there, and he said it was always something going on there. So he actually moved down to Anderson.
See, I get that anytime that you put a bunch of people in one place, stuff's going to happen, right? Bad stuff's going to happen because there's bad people. So I'm from New Orleans originally, and I get that all the time. Like, I've got family. It's so awful. It's like, dude, we live in the safest time ever to be alive, right? It is the safest time ever to be alive, statistically speaking. Anytime you get a large group of people in one place, and especially when you have, come at me, bro, income disparity in one area, right? You got a handful of people who are the majority of the money, and then a lot more people who aren't. You're going to have bad things happen because a lack of money drives people to be desperate, and desperation drives people to do questionable things. I like Spartanburg. And again, I've really only been around the downtown area, SC Upstate, like some of those areas, but I very much like Sparkle City. I don't know that I've really been anywhere in South Carolina that I was like, okay, this is the worst place. Like, this is the worst place I've been. Texter says Chesney, South Carolina might take that armpit title. I haven't been to Chesney yet. Oh, scratch that. I haven't done anything in Chesney that really like stands out to me, right? I haven't really done anything in Chesney. Now, I know that Chesney's kind of one of those spots because I think Chesney, if I recall correctly, is like up near the border.
Yeah,
right?
it's like right at the border of North Carolina.
Yeah.
I think they have like a peach festival or something.
It's like in the very northern part of Spartanburg County.
Yeah.
I have not, that I'm aware of, been into I may have driven through Chesney at one point, but I
It's
don't think
way
I've
up
been there. What is it about Chesney that would put it on the list? Trey says, I'm from Spartanburg. I take back all the nice things I've said about Brandon. Texter said, Rob, Ponte Vedra Beach is amazing. How can you hate the Jacksonville area? Easily. Like this. Jacksonville sucks. All right. Ponte Vedra's fine.
What about Amelia Island?
But Amelia Island's fine. But you're taking all of these places that aren't Jacksonville as an argument for Jacksonville to be good.
Yeah.
It's not. It's not. Jacksonville, the city, or should I say the 5 small cities that all claim to be a real city, Jacksonville sucks. Now, there are places around Jacksonville, like Ponte Vedra, that are fine. Like, I'll hit Ponte Vedra for a couple of days. But once you've worn out Ponte Vedra, what are you going to do? You're going to go to downtown Jacksonville and do what? Nothing?
Yeah.
That place sucks.
Did you
Stop.
see what the texter said on the stream? Anywhere around Orangeburg, it's too hot. Nothing is there except schools and prison, and not near the beach. Literally the armpit of South Carolina.
Orangeburg, South Carolina.
Yeah, it's a boring drive. If you're going down to Charleston, going through Orangeburg, it's very boring.
I don't think I've been to Orangeburg yet. I'd ask what there is to do there, but according to Skrilla, nothing. Nothing. Principal city in the county seat of Orangeburg County, South Carolina, population of just under 14,000 back in 2010. Over 12,500 according to the 2020 census. 37 miles southeast of Columbia on the North Fork of the Edisto River. That's where SCSU is. That's where South Carolina State is. Okay. History dates back to 1704 when George Sterling set up a post for fur trade with Native Americans. All right, I'll have to go look. I don't know anything about Orangeburg. I have to give it a shot. Texas said, I've lived in Spartanburg and Anderson. Anderson is by far worse in Spartanburg. Crime rate is way higher in Anderson, South Carolina than Spartanburg.
I will say this. Crime has gone down in Spartanburg as time has gone by. However, it's still pretty high in Spartanburg. Anderson, they've gotten worse. I agree.
I don't know anything about it. I don't. I'll have to check it out. All right. What do you guys got? What's the worst place? We've always asked for the best of everything. What's the worst place in South Carolina? All right, let's get to some other stories before we take a break. Let's start with this one out of Major League Baseball. I'm intrigued. I have told you guys a lot more times that at the end of the day, anytime that any sporting entity, yes, even your favorite, even your school, your conference, college football, every court decision is made with one variable taking precedent over all of the rest. What is that one variable, ladies and gentlemen? Everybody together, 1, 2, 3. Money. It's money.
Talks.
It's always money. It's always been money. It's always going to be money, which is why this decision by the National Football League that I have heard being lambasted by fans around the country really isn't all that confusing, ladies and gentlemen. The NFL has decided that the first ever streaming exclusive playoff game will happen this season on Peacock. NBC Universal, the first media company to carry 3 NFL playoff games in the same weekend, will make one of them exclusive. The playoffs begin on January 13th. The early game that day will be seen on both NBC and on Peacock. There will be a second game that evening, and it will be Peacock exclusive.
This is a head scratcher.
It's not, Brandon.
I would not pay. What's next? You're going to put Super Bowl on pay-per-view?
If it makes more money, yes.
I'm not going to pay for it.
It doesn't matter. This is one of the hardest things to accept as a sports fan. And I'm not saying this to be rude to you.
Mm-hmm.
I am just using you as an illustration of most sports fans.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care. Doesn't matter. How much money you are or are not willing to give to NBC Universal is irrelevant to the NFL. All that matters is how much money NBC Universal is willing to give to the NFL.
Did you
That's
watch
all.
any of the Amazon Prime games?
All of them.
They were terrible.
Sure. I don't disagree. And you know what I did every Thursday night?
Turned it off.
No, I turned them on and I watched them anyway. Now, granted, it may have just been to make smart-ass jokes on Twitter about how bad the game was,
Yeah.
but eyeballs were on. But again, you, and I'm using the royal you the way I'm pointing at Brandon, so I feel like a bit of a jackass right now. You, Brandon, and me, and all of our listeners, we don't matter. The only thing that matters here is how much money NBC Universal is giving to the NFL. If NBC Universal went to the NFL and said, we will give you $500 billion phenomenal dollars to only put NFL games on Peacock, the NFL would go, sorry,
Okay.
Brandon, you're going to have to buy Peacock, right? The NFL doesn't care how many people tune into Peacock. They just care how much NBC Universal is going to give to them. Now, I don't know what the contract for an exclusive playoff game on a streaming platform is. I have no idea what this we're going to find out down the line. I suspect it's going to be a number that we all go, what?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you think it's a bad idea, or I think it's a bad idea, or John and Greer thinks it's a bad idea, or Billy Ray in Greenville thinks it's a bad idea. The only thing it matters is, does NBC Universal sign a stupid big check to the NFL that the NFL goes, yeah, it works for us, right? Outside of that, they don't care. It doesn't matter. This doesn't make sense from the perspective of let's grow the game, right? This doesn't make sense from the perspective of let's grow the game. Growing the game takes two things: money and fans that can be gained. The NFL as a whole grows itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is the most popular sporting league, certainly in the United States, and one of the top 3 internationally,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're not worried about growth. Their numbers are always going to be fine and likely always going to be on the rise, even if slowly. So they don't need to worry about growing the game. The only thing they need to be concerned with is money. Now, if this decision was made elsewhere, like for instance, if the NHL made this decision, right? They said, we're going to do the conference finals and game 1 between Carolina and Florida is available only on streaming network X. I would go, that's bad. Because one of the ways that you can grow this game if you're a hockey fan is to see it put somewhere that's easily accessible. Somewhere that a dude flipping channels at 9:30 p.m. when this game is X amount,
Tied
through.
2-2 going into the third period.
Right. If I'm flipping channels and I come across this game, I go, yeah, what the hell? There's nothing on.
Yeah.
And then maybe I get into hockey, maybe I don't. The NFL's fine. Because here's the reality. If you're a big enough fan that you care,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to go over to Peacock and you're going to watch. You can say you're not, but here's the thing. Peacock, as Ryan just pointed out on the text line with the Tap Outs and Touchdowns podcast, NBC Peacock is free with advertisements, right? With ads, it's free. So you can say all you want. I'm not supporting that. Yeah, you will. And if you don't, it doesn't matter because the numbers are going to be there. And NBC Universal's already scratched the check. If they did, this announcement wouldn't have come out already. So it doesn't matter that you think it's a bad idea because you're like, oh, how's this going to grow the game? It doesn't matter. That game's already grown. This would be a bad idea for soccer, for hockey, for any of the sports that are on the outside looking in. But it's not a bad idea for the 4 big ones, NBA, MLB, NFL. Yeah, I would actually say for 3 of the 4 because I think it is bad for NHL. But it makes sense for the NFL. NBC is going to give them a lot of money for this exclusivity, right? Exclusivity is what you pay for in broadcasting. They have the money to give the NFL. The NFL now has the money. That deal's done. Well, it's a bad idea. Why? If you care enough, you're going to tune in to watch it. And if you're not going to tune in to watch it, respectfully, you're not a hardcore fan. You might be a pretty good fan, pretty big fan, but you're not a hardcore fan, which means you're likely not going to contribute more to the NFL's model than you already do. And if it's your team, look me in the face and tell me you're not going to download Peacock, even if it's for one night. That's all NBC Universal needs to do is get you to download the app.
Just do it one time.
One time.
Well, you remember that NFL Live or what NFL Plus or whatever in the world it was called, how you can watch all your teams out-of-market games? So I was like, oh, that's a good idea. I can watch the Falcons because I'm not paying for DirecTV. At the time, they had NFL Network. So I downloaded it thinking I'm going to watch the Falcons play. Nope, never got to watch a single Falcons game on there. All it was audio. And I'm like, well, this is a waste of money. So I quickly deleted that subscription. I understand they still got some money out of me, but still, it was it's false advertising saying you can watch every out-of-market game.
You gotta read the small print, man. Gotta read the small print. It was always there. That out-of-market game, or excuse me, locked out games in your hood, you would have audio available. It was always there. It sucks. It sucks. But again, they just need a fraction of the people who downloaded it to decide it was worth sticking around, even if they couldn't actually watch the game. Breaking news before we go to break. The 76ers have dismissed Coach Doc Rivers.
Wow.
My man.
Didn't he say he had like 2 years left or whatever?
He had 2 years left on his contract. He has been dismissed. Rivers led the Sixers to the Eastern Conference semifinals in each of his 3 seasons on the job, but they let him go. You want me to tell you why? I'll tell you why before we go to break. Because James Harden was over Doc Rivers. If they want to keep James Harden, he's a free agent. They are going to have to offer him likely a 3 to 4 year deal, probably closer to 4. Harden didn't want Rivers there. It was very obvious. If I watched a little bit of his I watched highlights of his press conference yesterday. And in that press conference, every time they asked him about Doc, he was like, nah, next question. Nah, next question. They did this just to have a chance at keeping James Harden in the fold. And it's still not a guarantee that they will.
No.
But as I mentioned yesterday, Doc Rivers was the captain of the one-ring ship. He got one. He got here over and over. Don't get me wrong. I think the team fell out from under him as much as he fell apart. But they wanted a chance to keep James Harden, and getting rid of Doc Rivers was the only way to do it. Let's take a break. We'll come back here in just a minute. Got a few more stories I want to run through before we get out of here for the day. My name is Rob Brown. Brandon's on the ones and twos, and you are listening to The Rob Brown Show on the Fan Upstate. Okay. All right, guys, I got a live read coming up here. Y'all stay right there. We will be right back. Doc Rivers out, head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers, no Moss. My working theory at this point, they're going to try to keep James Harden. And James was not going to do it if Doc Rivers was still the coach. It's still a desperation heave, right? Question is, would you have rather kept Doc or would you have rather kept the beard? The 76ers have cast their lot to try to keep Harden. Question's going to be, what do they do short of making him the GM to allow this to happen? No idea. No idea. No way to know. So we'll see. We'll see what happens next. A couple of other stories I want to get into before I get out of here. Talk Oakland Athletics. I have mentioned to you a number of times that I am sick to my larger than it should be stomach about what the Oakland Athletics are doing to their fans. But as I've mentioned, every decision that gets made by every sports entity that you love is about money before everything else. It just is. Sports becomes much less stressful when you accept that. So, in that, it is easy to understand the move, and it's a little bit more clear now. Why? The Oakland Athletics have reached an agreement to develop the club's new Las Vegas stadium, barring another change of plans. And it is bigger than you thought it was going to be. Yesterday, the A's announced an agreement to build a stadium on the current site of the Tropicana Hotel. Now, for those of you who have not been to Vegas, the Tropicana Hotel is on the Strip, right? The thought was, when the A's announced that they were going to move to Vegas, that they would be building a baseball field, sure. But the thought that was going to be was it was going to be on the other side of and a little bit away from the Vegas Strip. But here's the reality. The reason you move a team to Vegas, like the Knights, the reason you move a team to Vegas is because you realize that every home game is going to be a sellout, right? Now, baseball, maybe not every game because you're going to have a lot of day games, but let's be real. If your boy is out in Vegas, I'm there to drink, gamble, and have a lovely time with my life and then come back home and pretend that none of it happened. If I'm in Vegas, the majority of the fun things that I want to do happen at the nighttime. If that's a professional baseball game, wonderful. Especially if I can organize a trip around my team going to Vegas. I'll tell you straight up right now. I already have it on the plan. I have already alerted the fiancé that our first trip to Vegas together will be when the Braves go out there to play the Vegas A's or whatever they end up getting called. By the way, Aces, great name for a team in Vegas. The WNBA team, the Vegas Aces, is a great name.
And they're a great team.
Golden Knights is a great name, too.
Yep.
Good play on words there.
Gold.
I would love to be there when the Braves play their first series on the road in Las Vegas.
I wonder what they're going to call them.
No idea. We'll come to that. This is a great play. You put the baseball stadium right on the Strip, which means it is even easier for me to get to a game now, right?
Mhm.
Because it's one thing if I've got to wake up, nurse the hangover, buy a ticket, then I've got to get an Uber or a cab, and I got to go way to the other side of the Strip, and then I got to cross over the highway there because the Strip is a highway. Got to cross 8 lanes of traffic, and it just sounds like an absolute nightmare. You put it right there on the Strip? Not anymore.
Mhm.
I could just stagger out of the Mandalay Bay at 6:30 and make it to a 7 o'clock first pitch. That sounds incredible. I can knock myself down a brewski or 3 on the walk there. Yeah, that sounds amazing. Let's do that. This is the way. This is a great way for them to make this happen. This is why they moved, kids. This is why they ruined the Coliseum. This is why they busted up the love of A's fans. Because at the end of the day, they don't care if it is a diehard legacy fan whose dad and granddad were also fans and going to the same stadium for the same team for 70 years, or if it's some drunk jackass like me in Vegas. They just want a butt in the seat and an eye on the TV.
Did you see how many fans the Athletics average per game? It's 93-29.
I agree.
Worst in the majors.
But here's the problem. The problem is that's not because A's fans are bad.
No, it's because the team is
That's
terrible.
because the team is garbage. I would like to point out that the Atlanta Braves have 4 of the top 12 odds getters for NL MVP.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to point out that 2 of them came from the Oakland Athletics organization.
And they're working on possibly trading get another one out of there.
Yep. 2 of the Braves' current 4 NL MVP vote getters, Matt Olson
And Sean Murphy.
and Sean Murphy, both came over from the A's. Why? Because they started playing well.
And they wanted to go to a winning atmosphere. And the Athletics thought, hey, we're going to get good talent coming out of this. And as you see, the trades that they have were bust.
They didn't do it to be good.
No.
They did it to get Murphy and Olsen out of there because the Oakland A's were the real life major league movie. They went, these guys might be good, which means A, we might be better, and B, we have to pay them.
Yep.
So instead, let's get them out of here. Remember, at one point, one of those trades, they ended up with Christian Pache, who was one of the Braves' top recruit or top prospects.
Then he play for like Kansas City now?
Yeah, because they traded him too, because they're like, he might get good too. We need to get him the hell up out of here.
Mm-hmm.
The reason the A's average less than 10,000, and by the way, this year, I think it's actually like less than 5,000.
Yeah, it's terrible.
It's because the team sucks intentionally and they do nothing for the stadium. So the Coliseum is literally full of possums and human feces.
And it's crumbling.
Literally. That's why they did this. So they got their way. They're now going to Vegas. They got their destination. They're on the Strip. They're going to have 55,000 in every game. And they don't care if it's legacy fans or not. They just care that they're there and people are watching. It is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we'll get that out of the way. Here's another story that cropped up. We're not going to spend a ton of time on it because it's really not that big of a surprise. But we mentioned to you yesterday that the sale of the Washington Commanders has gone through. That is done. They will have new ownership sooner rather than later. Per Ian Rappaport, a group headed by Philadelphia 76ers and New Jersey Devils majority owner Josh Harris has come up with a $6.05 billion record for an American sports team. Snyder was reportedly dragging out the sale process until the deal got completed on Friday. The deal is still subject to a vote of other NFL team owners. There still are some concerns, but it's going to go through, and we'll come to those later on. What is interesting is that according to Don Van Natta Jr. and Seth Wickersham of ESPN, the investigation into alleged sexual harassment and misconduct at the hands of Dan Snyder alongside financial impropriety is all but done at this point. And where does that lead us? Dan Snyder is now fighting the release of the full report.
That ain't going to win. He is in so much trouble.
No, he's not. He just sold the team for $6.05 billion.
He's going to have to pay that fine, though.
Oh, darn. Out of $6.05 billion. You could fine him $100 million, and it is a fraction
of what he has
of the net worth that he just got. A fraction of the net worth that he just picked up from a $6.05 billion sale. You could fine him the biggest fine in American sports history times 5, and it would be a fraction of what he just got. I am more interested by the fact that this is being allowed to drag out.
Yeah.
Release the report. They're not going to. You know why? It is because the NFL has basically turned a blind eye to everything that was going on within the Commanders team organization until what? Until it hurt them financially. Until Dan Snyder started screwing with rich guys' money, they didn't care. And now that he screwed with their money, they find themselves in a weird spot because they got to figure out, how do we let this guy go? How do we let him go because he screwed up our money? But how do we let him go without saying it is because he screwed with our money? But how do we let him go without saying he screwed with our money, even though everybody knows he screwed with our money, but also not bring light to the fact that we let him get away with effectively criminal violations for years and did nothing about it. I don't care about any of that. What I care about is the fact that Dan Snyder allowed people to be injured, disrespected, harassed, and assaulted under his watch for a decade, effectively,
And
if
he
not
pushed it under the
longer.
rug.
And the NFL did nothing about it, and they didn't decide to act until Dan Snyder started screwing with their money, and that's when they decided to jump out here. Now, again, none of this matters because it's not like any of us are going to stop watching the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
But I still want to throw as much mud on the shield as I can because that's the only way anything changes down the line, aside from us just not watching anymore. Let's be honest, we're just not gonna do. We're just not gonna do it. All right, last story. Then we'll take a break. I came across a very interesting tweet last night, and one that I kind of wanted to get into. The Athletic has kind of gained a little bit of notoriety over the years as a somewhat commendable source of journalism. They have a podcast. It is simply titled The NBA Show. The host of the Rob Brown Show, Rob Brown, is not a guy that can critique lack of creativity in naming things. Anyway, they have a rotating set of hosts on this show. Zach Harper, Sam Amick, Anthony Slater, Fred Katz, amongst others, all join in on this pod. Zach Harper was hosting the Athletics NBA Show pod, and he said, quote, "I think the biggest nightmare we have is a Miami versus Denver finals. I don't believe in conspiracies. I don't believe in the league getting in the way. I do think something happens here. I don't think there's a chance in hell we're getting Miami versus Denver," end quote. One of the co-hosts then argues that in David Stern's league, they would definitely have gone out of their way to prevent a Denver v. Miami series. Mo goes on to say, the co-host goes on to say that Adam Silver is too nice, and Zach Harper goes on to say, quote, "I think you're pulling a righty out of the bullpen and telling Scott Foster, okay, Scotty, do what you need to do, ... to finish that sentence paraphrasing, to prevent a Denver-Miami finals." Why? This is, to me, one of the two big, actually, it is part of the biggest problem that I have with the National Basketball Association. The National Basketball Association has zero desire for anybody other than the major markets to succeed. That's just a fact at this point. They have always gone out of their way to do whatever they can to allow the Lakers, the Knicks, the Nets, the Bulls, the Clippers to succeed, and to do so at the expense of the small market teams. Denver's a big city, but they are considered small market by the NBA standpoint. Same with the Miami. Same with the Miami Heat. They are considered small markets. Of the teams remaining, Boston and Los Angeles are the two big markets. When it comes to revenue and ratings, Boston v. LA would be the series that gets the marquee. You have two guys who report on the NBA here saying the NBA's nightmare is for small market teams to create the entire NBA Finals matchup. That's not the problem. The problem is that then they fall lockstep with that being the correct way to handle it. It is absurd to me that the NBA has created this atmosphere where, call them what you want, journalists, commentators, talking heads, bloviators, whatever you want to title them, are not only comfortable, but make jokes out of saying not only can the NBA do it, but that the NBA should rig the NBA finals to make sure we have big market teams in here.
That's terrible.
There is no other league that allows its media and its fans to talk about their league rigging their finals like the NBA. It is unbelievable. Now, you got to throw it back to the Tim Donaghy situation. Keep in mind that for a while, the NBA's front page news was a referee corruption scandal. How many of y'all remember anybody from the NBA getting fired over that?
I just remember him. That's it.
No. The only guy who got fired for it was the guy who brought it to light. Now, granted, he was involved with it, but the NBA allowed that to be the story and then did nothing about it. I had a conversation about 3 weeks ago, right at the beginning, I guess maybe a game or two into the opening round of the NBA playoffs, where I sat down with a buddy of mine at a local watering hole, and we were knocking back a couple of brewskis, talking about it. And I was like, who you got? And he's like, I'm going to be real with you, dude. I don't watch the NBA. I was like, why? And he goes, too easy to believe that it's rigged. And I said, whatever do you mean? And he goes, it's too easy for me to believe that this league is rigged. And he brought this up. He's like, go back to the Donaghy thing. What were the consequences of that? Tim Donaghy got fired and went to jail. Outside of that, what happened? It was like, really not that much. He goes, the fact that the NBA didn't burn it to the ground and rebuild that whole thing from the ground up shows me that they either knew or they didn't care. And if they either knew or didn't care, why am I to believe anything has changed? And I'm like, all right, that's a fair point. A couple of years ago, we had a Milwaukee versus Phoenix finals. And it was fine. It was fine. Nothing got burned to the ground. Everything was fine. This blows my mind. The NBA would rather see Lakers-Boston. Now, to me, Boston's the favorite in the series against Miami. I love Jimmy Buckets. I love the Heat. But Boston is it at this point, right? Boston is it. Lakers Nuggets, I'm leaning Denver, but like in 7. Unless they just wear out LeBron, which is a possibility. But I'm gonna lean Nuggets in 7. I am pulling for Heat v. Denver. Just because screw you to the NBA, right? Just give me the small market, the best possible small market matchup. I don't get how we create. I'm not saying the NBA is rigged, right? I can't imagine a world in which Jordan Poole, Clay, Joel Embiid, James Harden, Steph Curry all got let down by the NBA. The script would have had the Warriors here to go for another one.
Yep.
Steph to get 5, right? I'm not saying it's scripted. That's not the conversation I'm having. The conversation I'm having is that it's frustrating as a small market team for the league to have created a scenario where big-time journalists or talking heads, bloviators, commenters, whatever you want to call them, are openly not just joking, but insinuating straight up that the league would pull a string to at least give a little nudge to the big market teams over small market teams. Because if you're a fan of, I don't know, hypothetically, the New Orleans Pelicans, what the hell is the point of me watching?
Yeah.
Right? I watch every year for the small, tiny little bit of me that thinks right timing, right chemistry, right moment, maybe we can do something. And this kind of conversation takes that away from me. What's the point? Quick break back after this to wrap up the show. My name is Rob Brown. Brandon's on the 1s and 2s. Zoe scheduled to be back with us tomorrow. We'll let you know. The Rob Brown Show rolls on. It is the Fan Upstate. Oh, man. How the Bobcats got screwed out of the number 1 pick by a team the NBA owns. Yeah, no, I think it's fair to call conspiracy. Can't prove it happened. That's what Lonzo or Mark just emailed.
Shoot, Dexter said here, but just look at the free throw disparity between LA and Golden State last round.
Yeah. I mean, up until game 5, it was what? Over 2-1.
Steve, I have family that used to live in Spartanburg, and they had nothing good to say about Spartanburg. That's why. I understand that there's some good moonshine over there, but I just don't like Spartanburg. Nothing against people in Spartanburg, I just don't like Spartanburg. It's like when I lived in Atlanta, I didn't particularly like going to Marietta, but I had lived in Marietta, and I lived in Woodstock. I prefer to live in Roswell or Alpharetta.
Prominent poster at Penny's on Park Place.
This is your sign. Well, signs. To try Staples and see the difference. Get $15 off signs, banners, and posters when you spend $75 or more.
From Staples, and I couldn't miss it.
N617. Visit staplesconnect.com/print for details.
$25 all-in tickets to over 3,800 shows. For your now. And many more. $5 all-in tickets to a show. Get your friends and grab your $25 all-in tickets now through May 16th. Head to livenation.com/concertweek. That's livenation.com/concertweek.
At Lowe's, we're always bringing pros more ways to save. Right now, get a Flex 24-volt half-inch drill driver kit for only $99. Was $179. That's a savings of $80. Plus, you'll always save big on job lot quantities when buying select building supplies in bulk. Lowe's knows savings. Lowe's knows pros. About 3/27/20 while supplies last. U.S. only. Lowe's reserve the rights on new quantities. Discount taken at time of purchase.
Finding great people to hire can be like trying to find a needle in a haystack, but not with ZipRecruiter. Their powerful matching technology delivers so many qualified candidates. It's like finding a needle in a needle stack. In fact, 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. For less hay and more needles, head to ZipRecruiter.
And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free. At ZipRecruiter.com/free. That's ZipRecruiter.com/free.
Join us at Odyssey as we all do our one thing. Together, millions of things for our planet. When planning your summer vacation, pick a destination close to where you live to limit your use of fuel. When we each share our one thing, it becomes a million things for our planet. What's your one thing?
This afternoon, heavy thunderstorms, high of 86.
Weather brought to you by Staples. Staples stores are a new world of possible. Innovative tools for small business and remote workers and learners. Explore more at your local Staples store or staplesconnect.com.
Listen on the Odyssey app. Search the fan upstate.
Real quick before we get out of here, NBA Draft Lottery is this evening, ladies and gentlemen. Victor Wembanyama, the French 7-footer who's got handles and a deep ball, is the prize. 14% chance to win the lottery for the worst 3 teams in the league, Detroit, Houston, and San Antonio. Right after that, 12.5%, your Charlotte Hornets.
I think Portland gets the pick.
Portland at a 10.5% chance.
It's always the least expected that has the biggest chance.
My New Orleans Pelicans have a 0.5% chance.
There's a chance they can get him too.
Shock the world, baby.
Well, they're saying Portland needs to get over that hump because remember the last time they had the number 1 pick was NBA draft bust Greg Oden.
Yep. Here's what it comes down to. I really do sincerely hope Charlotte gets the pick, and here's why. As much as I would love to see Victor Wembanyama, Brandon Ingram, and Zion Williamson on a team together because look out NBA Finals, I really want to see Charlotte happen because this makes Charlotte relevant, right? Charlotte has been the definition of mid for how many years? Outside of LaMelo Ball, what have they done? They're so relevant. I can tell you this. We have talked more Furman football and Wofford football on the show than we've talked NBA team that is an hour and 30 minutes from here. This team has nothing to show for it. Nothing. I'm not saying Victor Wembanyama would make them relevant.
I think it would.
I
think they would be able to go to the playoffs more with him, just him alone.
I'd like to think so. I just would love to talk about them. And at this point, it feels like bringing up the Charlotte Hornets. What is the discussion with them? What do we talk about with Charlotte? Even as somebody whose job is to take uninteresting and find something interesting to talk about, what do I talk about with them right there? So tomorrow, we'll tell you where the Hornets are picking and see if they have won the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes. Ladies and gentlemen, that is our radio broadcast today. Hope that you have a lovely rest of your afternoon. Don't drink and drive. I'll punch you in the face. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. We'll see you back here tomorrow for the midweek edition of the Rob Brown Show and the Fan Upstate. Later. All right, guys. Thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Appreciate it. I got to run out here because I got a meeting in about 20 minutes. Have a good rest of your day. Thanks. Goodbye.